There are breakdowns that happen quietly in the privacy of a room, and then there are breakdowns that unfold in front of millions. Recorded, replayed, judged, consumed. Britney Spears' collapse in 2007 belonged to the second kind, a tragedy not hidden in shadows but exposed under the blinding heat of flashing cameras. Yet behind the spectacle, behind the headlines and the mockery, there was a truth no one wanted to hear. A truth that Hollywood, the media, and even those closest to her allowed to drown in silence. In January of that year, a young woman who had once ruled the world walked barefoot into a hair salon in Los Angeles, sat before a mirror, and shaved her head. Paparazzi swarmed the windows, shouting her name. The clippers buzzed, and with each lock of hair that fell, the world leaned closer, hungry for a narrative, blind to the pain. Hours later, photographs of her entered global circulation, as if her suffering were a form of entertainment to be consumed. Her estimated net worth, nearly $40 million, stood in stark contrast to the chaos surrounding her life. Wealth could buy security, but not freedom. Fame could open doors, but not protect her. And as the world watched, Britney Spears became less a person and more a spectacle, a symbol of a system that devoured its own stars. But what truly led to that breaking point? What silence hid beneath the glittering surface of her career? And how does a girl who once made the world dance lose ownership of her own life? How does a name so loud fall apart in a silence no one dared to understand? Before the world watched her fall, it first watched her rise, not gently, but like a comet blazing across the sky. Britney Spears was born in Mississippi and raised in the small town of Kentwood, Louisiana, where her voice echoed in school halls and church rooms long before it echoed across stadiums. Even as a child, there was something magnetic about her, a confidence wrapped in innocence, a spark the world wasn't ready for, but instantly recognized. Her early break came with the Mickey Mouse Club, where she stood alongside future giants of pop culture. But it wasn't until 1998 that she became a phenomenon. At just 16, she stepped into the spotlight with Baby One More Time, and the world stopped. The beat, the schoolgirl uniform, the voice both sweet and commanding. It all collided to create a cultural earthquake. Overnight, she wasn't simply famous. She was iconic. Her tours sold out within hours. Her second album shattered expectations. Magazines crowned her Princess of Pop, while millions of young women saw in her a mirror of their own desires and insecurities. Every stage she touched erupted into screams. Every appearance pulled crowds the size of small cities. Britney didn't perform, she radiated. But beneath that glow, cracks slowly began to form. Fame placed her under a microscope so sharp it cut. Every smile was analyzed, every relationship dissected, every step scrutinized with merciless precision. She was praised and punished in equal measure, worshipped for her talent, judged for her humanity. And amid the flashing lights, Britney learned a truth she never asked for. That glory is not a destination, but a burden, one that grows heavier with every cheer. Yet behind the roaring applause, another story, quieter, darker, was already beginning to write itself. By the mid-2000s, the bright, confident girl who once dominated global charts was slowly fading behind a wall of exhaustion. Britney Spears was no longer just a pop star. She had become a commodity, a headline, a moving target. Every moment of her life was filmed, photographed, magnified. Each day, dozens of paparazzi waited outside her home, engines running, lenses aimed, ready to devour whatever pieces of her remained. Her private world, already fragile, began to fracture. The pressure of fame collided violently with the pressure of adulthood. A whirlwind marriage, 2 pregnancies, a divorce played out under relentless scrutiny. She had barely healed from one wound before another opened. Friends said she looked tired, overwhelmed, stretched thin between motherhood and a media landscape that refused to grant her a moment of stillness. At home, she searched for peace in small rituals, holding her sons close, playing music softly in dim rooms, moving barefoot across quiet hallways. But the peace never lasted. Custody battles became public battlegrounds. Tabloids turned her grief into profit. The world she had once ruled now circled her like vultures, waiting for her to fall. The cameras grew more aggressive, the headlines crueler, and Britney, already worn down by years of scrutiny, began to unravel. She avoided public spaces, shielding her face behind hoodies and oversized sunglasses. She drove aimlessly at night, chased by flashing bulbs that refused to blink. She cried in the back of cars, surrounded by strangers who never looked away. In these years, her loneliness deepened. Not the quiet solitude of a home after midnight, but the isolating loneliness of being watched constantly, yet understood by no one. Every misstep became a spectacle. Every moment of vulnerability transformed into a global event. By late 2006, the signs were undeniable. The girl who once danced fearlessly on stage was now moving through life like someone carrying a weight too heavy to bear. A weight made of expectation, intrusion, heartbreak, and a silence nobody dared to interpret. And within that silence, the cracks widened. Until one day, everything finally broke. The night of February 16th, 2007 has become one of the most infamous nights in modern pop culture. A night frozen in photographs, replayed in documentaries, dissected by people who never paused to consider the human being at the center of it all. But long before Britney Spears stepped into that Los Angeles hair salon, long before she lifted the clippers to her head, something inside her had already broken. She arrived barefoot, wearing a gray hoodie, her eyes swollen from crying. Paparazzi swarmed the entrance, shouting her name, blocking her path, trapping her in a cage of flashing lights. Inside, the salon was dim, quiet, almost peaceful. The kind of peace Britney hadn't felt in years. She asked the stylist to shave her head. The stylist refused. Britney took the clippers herself. With each buzz of the blade, her reflection changed. Not just physically, but spiritually. It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't madness. It was liberation. A silent scream against a world that had taken ownership of her body, her choices, her image. The cameras outside recorded every passing second, unaware they were capturing not a spectacle, but a woman desperately trying to reclaim something she'd lost: control. That hours later, she drifted into a tattoo shop, her newly shaved head shining beneath fluorescent lights. Paparazzi pressed against the glass. Britney sat quietly, her hands trembling as she whispered, "I don't want anyone touching me." It was a sentence that, in its simplicity, revealed the truth that headlines had missed. She had been touched, pushed, handled, shaped, and consumed for too long. The next days spiraled. Custody battles intensified. Paparazzi followed her car like wolves chasing wounded prey. Every stumble was photographed, every tear sold. The world didn't offer her help. It offered her exposure. Her breakdown wasn't a moment. It was a culmination. Years of pressure, invasion, heartbreak, and dehumanization condensed into a single night that the media replayed endlessly, stripping it of context, empathy, meaning. But behind the headlines, one question lingered, quiet yet devastating. How much pain must a person endure before the world decides to see them as human again? 5. And when the world finally stopped laughing, it began to make decisions for Britney Spears. In February 2008, only a year after her very public collapse, a court approved a legal conservatorship, a structure typically reserved for the elderly, the gravely ill, or those incapable of managing even the simplest aspects of their lives. Britney, at just 26 years old, became a ward of the system. Her father, Jamie Spears, was placed in charge of her finances, her career, and nearly every personal decision she could make. To the public, the arrangement was presented as protection, a safety net for a fragile woman who needed care. But to Britney, the walls closed in. A life that had once been too exposed now became one she couldn't access. Her phone calls monitored, her relationships supervised, her money controlled, work obligations scheduled without her consent. She could fill arenas, perform flawless choreography under blazing lights, and earn millions. Yet she couldn't legally choose how to spend her own money or even decide when she could see her children. Her home, once a sanctuary, became a place of shadows, quiet hallways, doors that symbolized restriction instead of privacy. Rooms filled with trophies and platinum records that reminded her of a freedom she no longer possessed. The world watched her comeback performances with awe, unaware of the contract behind the curtain. She could sing for thousands, but she could not control the life that followed when the music stopped. In interviews, her eyes often flickered with emotion she didn't dare articulate. She spoke carefully, as if weighted by invisible boundaries. Years passed. Silence deepened. The conservatorship remained. But cracks began to form. Not inside Britney, but inside the narrative that had surrounded her breakdown. Fans noticed inconsistencies. How could a woman deemed incapable of making basic choices successfully headline tours, judge televised competitions, and release albums under intense professional pressure? The contradiction sparked something the world had not expected: a movement. In 2019, the phrase "Free Britney" erupted across social media. It was dismissed at first: a conspiracy, a fringe theory, a misinterpretation of legal documents. But the voices grew louder. Journalists began to investigate. Former employees stepped forward. Court filings surfaced, and slowly a picture emerged that the conservatorship had become more than protection. It had become a structure that dictated every corner of her life. In 2021, after 13 years of silence, Britney finally spoke in open court. Her words shook the world, raw, trembling, and devastating. She described feeling trapped, manipulated, terrified, ignored. She said she wanted her life back. And at that moment, the world finally listened. The conservatorship was terminated later that year, granting her the freedom she had been denied for over a decade. But freedom cannot erase the years lost, the decisions taken, the silence endured. Today, Britney lives on her own terms, a woman rebuilding her world piece by fragile piece. But her story remains an echo of a darker truth: that even in modern Hollywood, a legend can lose ownership of her own life while the world watches, believing it is entertainment. And like a house that witnessed too many storms, some of the rooms inside her story will forever remain locked, holding secrets the world was never meant to hear. 6. Long after the headlines faded and the world moved on to new obsessions, the story of Britney Spears remained. Not as a tabloid spectacle, but as a haunting reminder of what happens when a human life becomes public property. Her journey from global icon to controlled subject, from collapse to liberation, revealed a truth far more unsettling than any rumor the media once amplified: that even the brightest stars can be dimmed by a system built to profit from their suffering. Britney survived what few could have endured: the cameras, the courtrooms, the years of silence imposed on her, and the weight of an industry that consumed her youth, her autonomy, her peace. But through it all, she never lost the spark that made the world fall in love with her in the first place. Her voice, once playful, then wounded, now defiant, continues to echo across generations, not as a flawless pop fantasy, but as the sound of a woman who refused to break completely, even when the world demanded it. So what, then, is her true legacy? Is it the music that defined an era? The legal battle that changed the conversation about autonomy? Or is it the resilience of a woman who reclaimed her story after years of being silenced? Perhaps the real inheritance Britney Spears leaves behind is not measured in albums, awards, or courtroom victories, but in the uncomfortable truth her life exposed: that fame can free and fame can imprison, often at the same time. And in the quiet after the storm, one truth remains: le silence ne tue pas la mémoire, il la purifie. Silence does not kill memory, it purifies it. Britney's silence has ended, but her echo, raw, honest, unfiltered, will outlive the noise forever.